So, if we really want to understand the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma, we understand it best in terms of addiction and recovery, snapping out of our dream and waking up to reality and rehabilitating ourselves and all our actions, our behaviors, our whole life so that we can wake up and be happy. So, the first part of this is the Four Noble Truths. The first of which is that life is hard. You're just going to suffer. All this whole world that we're in is filled with suffering. So, to say life is suffering, not too harsh for the Buddha. It's not that it just contains suffering or that sometimes we will. Life through and through, left to itself, is suffering in every form dissatisfaction, sadness, grief, etc., etc. Things not being quite right. In Christianity, we might call this original sin, this sense of that everywhere there's just something in need of fixing, in need of repair. And all of life is like this, both the pleasant and the unpleasant experiences, the Buddha taught. Because when things are unpleasant, obviously, dukkha, suffering. When they're pleasant, they're suffering because we know they won't last. And there's this attachment of the self to impermanence, or to permanence rather. And this causes our pain. We want something good to last. So it's just unavoidable. Left to itself, the self will suffer. And so where does this come from? It's caused by one thing and one thing alone: our self centered desires, things like craving, greed, lust, hunger and thirst in the metaphorical sense, selfishness, anything that wants for the self. And you can see there's a karmic or cause and effect logic here. When I want just for myself, it's going to be an investment in nothing because there is no self. And so it's like feeding something that just won't be satisfied. Left to itself, the self will desire. So, like dukkha, tanha is unavoidable. It's just the nature of things, it's what is going to happen. Pretty dismal, right? Except that we can get out of this. And this is the third noble truth: suffering can end. Think about it. Suffering ends when desire ends. When does the selfish desire end? When the self is brought to an end. Now, this sounds like a kind of a dismal view, or almost like he's advocating suicide. No. Okay, he's advocating reforming the self, viewing it in a different way. So, if I suffer because I want because I am. So, I is the thing, this concept of I, this fake self, has to go. How's it going to go? Well, he gets very practical here. It's going to go through this basic program, you might call it, for our addictions to the self, called the Eightfold Path. So it's kind of a rehab program to get us back into that middle way, moderation. We're not beating ourselves up. We're not overfeeding ourselves, so to speak. We're just living from the center and getting rid of all these addictions. And this encompasses every area of our life, we'll see. So much like an addiction program like the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, these are things the person needs to do in order to regain their health and happiness. So what is this eightfold path? It begins with right views, which means that to know the truth. Okay, if I think life is easy, I'm not going to get anywhere. Okay, if I know life is hard and I know what the cause of it is and I know it can come to an end, this is the right view. Right intentions, I've got to really mean it. I've got to want to change. Right speech, I've got to change the messages first up here and then out of the mouth that are negative, that say, oh, I can't do this, that encourage selfishness, things like gossip and all these kinds of things, which are just like toxic, right? They poison the mind and poison our relationships and life and so forth. Likewise, our actions. Number 4, right conduct. Our behavior has to change. And this is where we get back into the Buddhist moral precepts that we went over the other day. Right livelihood is talking about our career, our job. If what we're doing is in and of itself selfish, it's not going to get us anywhere. You can't be uh, a drug dealer or a cutthroat CEO of some corporation that's competing with everybody and also be unselfish and at peace, right? You can't be you can't be doing a career, having a career that's going to be inherently against this system of selflessness and growing in that. Sixth, we all know that we can begin something and it's great and we have a lot of momentum and energy in the beginning, but that effort has to be put in constantly. Perseverance, this might be called in number 6. Now, 7 and 8, right, mindfulness and meditation are very similar. So we have to be mindful of our whole life. We have to pay attention to it and see where, through meditation and reflection, we are being selfish so that we can root that out and change our mind. And then right meditation is this concentration of the mind in the center, right? Like we're always doing in the breathing meditation, to come to rest in the center. Now, what does this look like from a different optic? Well, there's our happy little monk. He's going to take us to the next slide, which is like this. Okay, so there could be seen. It could be seen as 3 movements. Okay, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8 steps of the Eightfold Path. In the first one, which is called wisdom or panna, okay, there are 2. Well, it's a Venn diagram, so we get 1 through 5 in there. Okay, so almost the first 5 are wisdom, having the right view, having the right intention, changing our words and behavior and livelihood. All this is wise, but it also moves into the realm of action or morality, or what's called sila. So the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th are all things changing our moral behavior. So we start out with the mind, with changing our views, to doing something about it. And then finally, this step at the top of the Venn diagram, concentration or samadhi, encompasses the last 3. So especially the mindfulness and the meditation. So it's almost like this journey deep into the mind where you're coming to the center. Look at that 8. It's right in the center where you're perfectly there, right? And that's where you're living from. So your life is in order. Your life has a balance to it. You're living healthily. You're living unselfishly. And it's constant journey to being at the center. And what is this state of being at the center called when it's finally achieved? The Buddhists call this nibbana or nirvana. This means literally the extinguishing of the self, totally annihilating it, getting rid of it, like a blowing out of a candle. So if you look at these, rather crude drawings here of this person who says, I crave, I suffer. What's the problem? The I, the self. Through the Eightfold Path, you get rid of this I and it's gone, right? The state of nirvana is a state of no self, no problems, no desires, no selfishness. And this one who has reached this state is called an arhat or a saint. So you move from self to no self, from selfish addiction to complete freedom and happiness. What I'm going to ask you to do in the assignment is to look at this very much in terms of addiction and recovery, of rehab, and you'll find that in Blackbaud. See you in class.